Welcome, Barry Leitch.
Thanks. Nice to see you.
Yeah, Barry, as you probably know, is a really renowned computer games musician, and I didn't actually realize how much work he'd done over the years. He'd been really, really prolific, going back to the mid '80s.
Yeah, been busy.
And I worked with you at Imagitec, obviously, back in the day. But how did you first get into computers and games?
Well, I always had a natural affinity for music.
Hmm.
And it wasn't, I mean, I started programming like a BBC Model B,
Yeah.
putting music on that. Um, Over the course of summer, I was like 14, 15 years old.
Hmm.
But it wasn't until I heard Rob Hubbard's demo on the Commodore 64, his
Hmm.
synth sample 2 demo, which was the first time. I mean, up until that point, music in video games was terrible. It was
Hmm.
usually just programmers that had typed stuff in. Um, and so it wasn't until Rob Hubbard created some music that sounded like real music on a computer. It's like, that's what I want to do. That's cool as shit. So that's what led me down this path.
And you didn't have any training as a musician, did you, to start with?
No, no, I left school when I was 16. I got my first video game soundtrack published when I was 15 and a half.
Right.
Yeah, so I was young. I mean, I'd created all these demos, sent them all to all the video game companies in the UK at the time, and finally one of them said that one tune that's not totally shit. We'll buy that one.
How did you go about making the music?
God, back then, on the Commodore 64, I mean, you were at the mercy of your music driver. You had to have the specific piece of code to play back your music.
Hmm.
And there was a package called Electrosound. It was the first commercially available piece of software where you could create a piece of music and it would, with a proper GUI and everything, and then it would package it into well, I say small, but it was actually huge, uh, piece of code that you could then give to a programmer who could include it in his game.
Ah, okay. But how did
So
you go
that's
about actually typing? I mean, did you use a keyboard? Or
no. Well, I mean, I had it. It wasn't like you had MIDI interfaces for the Commodore 64. I mean,
yeah.
MIDI was just. I think MIDI was 1987 or something. I can't
So,
remember.
so did you use the Commodore 64 keyboard as a sort of a music keyboard then? Is that how it
Yeah,
worked?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's when you started. And it was just a step time editor, and from there it progressed to the Amiga, where you had tracker software.
Yeah.
And you use your computer keyboard. Even now, I use a tracker to sequence music in, and you use your computer keyboard. I mean, I've got synthesizers that I've used over the years. I used to have one sitting on my desk that I'd noodle around for ideas on.
Hmm.
Now I've got a
Okay.
piano that I'm sitting playing. Yeah,
So your first game that was ICUPS, is that right?
yeah,
And is that the demo that got accepted?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what did you progress from there to the next game then? How did you go about that?
Well, I mean, after ICUPS was released, I mean, at the time, I mean, the only feedback you ever got, there wasn't any internet, so the only feedback
Hmm.
you would get were magazines. And so the magazines that reviewed the game, they said that, well, the music was a bit shit. So that was it. At 15 and a half, I'd had my first video game soundtrack published and my career had ended because they said the music. But so at the time, some of my buddies had started making a video game. And I said, look, I'm going to need a better music driver because I can't push Electrosound any further.
Yeah.
Just the technical things you needed to do to make it sound more realistic. Um, it just wasn't available in Electrosound. So I had my buddy, he wrote his own music driver, and so then I programmed the music for Marauder in it, which sounded a lot better. And I got a review where it was, I think, 89% or something for sound, which was quite
Hmm.
good. 489, somewhere around there. So I was like, yes, back in the game.
What was it like working with the synth chip?
Um, Frustrating. I mean, it's difficult when you're only allowed three notes at any one time. I
Yeah.
mean, most composers these days would struggle to write anything worth a damn with only three notes of polyphony.
Yeah.
So it was more about what you could squeeze in between the notes or on the very start of notes, to even just putting a white noise at the for a single, a few milliseconds at the beginning of each bass note would give you the feel of a hi-hat running through the track. So
Yeah,
there you've managed to squeeze two instruments onto one channel.
right.
And so
How would
by
you,
the time you apply that logic to all three channels, you could have, four, five, maybe six things going at one time.
yeah. How much memory did you normally have to play with to get these soundtracks on 8-bit machines? It's minuscule, isn't it?
Yeah, kilobytes. I mean, you're talking about 4, 5, 6 kilobytes at most.
Right.
I mean, if you save out an empty Outlook email, it's probably 30 kilobytes, which is, 500% bigger than those pieces of music.
How would you normally go about a soundtrack? So let's say I'm a publisher. I've got a game. It's a shoot 'em up. Let's say. What would you do when what would be the creative process in that?
Well, you take a look at the game. I mean, your role as the composer is to tell the player how they should feel about what they're doing on screen.
Yeah,
So if it's a shoot 'em up, you're going to feel like you're going to die at any minute. So you're going to want your music to be dramatic, up tempo. Got to make them feel, put them on the edge of their chair for
yeah,
duration of what they're playing, which is difficult because if the whole game's like that, you're talking about 30, 40 minutes of music that's all, you know, level 11, just constant bombardment with stuff. And you got to make the music interesting so they, when they hear it again and again and again, it doesn't get on their nerves.
yeah. Because obviously, with it being so short, you have to sort of repeat it, don't you? So you got to sort of be really intelligent about how you go about that.
Yeah, and you see, the big AAA games,
Mm.
they use a lot of layering and stuff where they'll just have like a simple background loop to start with, and then layer up instruments as it goes along, depending on, how much drama is going on screen. But
Yeah.
when you're talking about a simple game like a shoot 'em up, it's constant, all on, all the time. So
Let's assume.
like I was going to say, like a game like Horizon Chase Turbo, it's like that all the time. You're
Right.
constantly constantly going. The need for speed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's assume we've got the same game on like three different formats. Let's say it's Commodore 64, 8 bits here, Spectrum and Amstrad. How difficult was it to take that same piece of music and put it on those different machines?
Well, I always used to when I'd compose a piece of music, like I would compose on the Amiga because it
Mm.
was the best one at the time. It had four channels, whereas everything else usually had three: the Atari, the Commodore, Spectrum, Amstrad, Game Gear, all that stuff. So when I was writing a piece of music, I would have in mind how I was going to compress it from four down to three.
Mm.
So I might have an arpeggio on one of the channels where I could drop out some of the notes and replace them with kick drums, snare drums, without destroying the arpeggio and stuff. So you'd plan ahead.
Yeah. So, what would be the process though in taking it over? Would you just have a different driver for each machine?
Yeah, well, at Imagitec, we had a unified data structure. When we're doing the music drivers, we made sure they all shared the same note data. And the only thing you really had to change was the instruments for each machine
Ah, I
to
see.
take advantage of any special hardware that was available on those other machines.
Yeah,
Like the Commodore 64. I mean, you think about it, the music data is going to be the same, but the SID chip was more powerful. You could do more with that than you could with the Atari ST with the AY chip. Because that was just square wave or white noise. Whereas the
yeah.
Commodore 64, you could have sine, square, sawtooth.
Yeah, I was going through the games list, and you've worked on a few games that I've worked on, obviously, not just at Imagitech, but so things like Postman Pat and Postman Pat 2.
So
It's,
so you ended up doing stuff for Enigma because
oh,
that was
yes.
how I got fired from Imagitech. It was your fault.
Was it?
Yeah. Because what happened? You came into my office one day and you said, "Right, that's I'm fucking done working here. I'm tired of this place." And I'm like, "All right, if you're really done, then Mark Greenshield's up at Enigma. He's hiring people."
Oh, no,
And from there, you'd gone and you told Jolly that about the job, and Jolly went and told Martin. He said, Barry's telling people how to get jobs, where to get jobs. So Martin came and fired me from that.
Oh shit! I'm sorry, mate. No, I actually worked at Imagitec before. I worked at Enigma before Imagitec actually, so I knew about them already.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So I knew Mark. I knew Mark Greenshields and stuff already. So, but yeah, sorry that all happened, mate. Anyway, I didn't know about that.
that's all right. I went straight to Ocean. I got hired at Ocean within a couple of days. I was there
Okay.
for a year, then went to Origin Systems in Texas.
Right. Okay. Yeah, there was a big move over to America, wasn't there? In the early days, so you were getting all this freelance work. So how were you? Because it was pre-internet, obviously, wasn't it? How were
Yeah,
you? Were you just ringing companies up and offering your services?
yeah, pretty much. I mean, I worked for Imagitec for 5 years,
Yeah.
and they used to pimp me out to other companies. So that was how I ended up doing a lot of Gremlin stuff and some Bitmap Brother stuff.
Okay. Right. Okay. So let's go forward a little bit. So when did you first start using samples, and what was that like to your career?
That was the Amiga.
Yeah.
So that would have been 88. I was in Portsmouth when a friend lent me an Amiga and I got a copy of Sound Tracker. And it was like, holy cow, this changes everything because you had samples software instead of software generated instruments on the chips, you could actually have real sampled instruments. So a snare drum sounded like a real snare drum.
Yeah.
Did some approximation. So it really evened the playing field when it came to composition. You were no longer uh, reliant on your software driver capabilities because to make a snare drum on these like Atari ST stuff, it was either white noise that just went, or you would do fancy things like change the pitch of the white noise so it sounded more like a sneeze or something.
Right. Yeah. Is there any games where it's been an absolute, mission impossible, absolute nightmare project to work on?
Yeah, there's been a lot of us. I don't know. It's the usually the most difficult ones are the ones where they don't know what they want
Yeah.
and they won't give you creative control over creating the music for it. Uh, somebody, like a producer will have a vision in his head of how he wants it to sound like, but he just doesn't know what it is. And then you've got to try and extract that from him
Hmm.
using language because, they're not a composer. They can't put it into words what they want, but they'll know it when they hear it. Those are always the tricky ones. Actually, Horizon Chase 2 was very much like that. Um, they had asked the whole team, 60 people or so, what kind of music they wanted to hear in Horizon Chase 2, and they could only agree on one piece of music. And that made it very difficult because anytime I composed something that was slightly different to that one piece of music, they didn't like it.
Right.
And I ended up writing 23, 24 pieces of music for the game.
Jeez.
But I was constantly pushing that envelope, trying to steer it away from that one reference piece that they had.
Yeah.
And sometimes it worked, and sometimes I got email back telling me that it was shit. They didn't want that in their game.
Do you find that most people, when asked, do they just sort of name a band that they like, and it doesn't really match the game at all? It's just like, oh, I like Nirvana. Make it all sound like Nirvana. Is it that sort of thing normally?
Sometimes, I mean, yeah, it can be the worst one is when they would want it to sound like Star Wars,
Ah,
and they've only
right.
got like $200 to pay for the music. Like, well, you're not going to get Star Wars for $200. Let's set the expectation right here.
You've done a lot of video, dialogue editing for games, haven't you, as well?
Yeah, I'm actually doing one just now. Yeah, it's honest work keeps me out of trouble.
So what
I've
would that
actually done some
normally?
voice acting as well. There's a video game, Ghost Pirates of Voodoo Island. I was
Right.
the lead character in that. I had to play a short, fat Scottish pirate who sounded just like me. It was great. Just basically had to go and talk for 8 hours.
So what would you normally do then when you're editing dialogue? Is it just sort of cutting out samples and trimming them up and that
Yeah,
sort of?
yeah. You get a huge recording of the session, and then you just got to go through and edit out you've got to break that into, 200-300 lines of dialogue. Um, you've got to fade the lines in and out so they don't click when they start playing the sample and stuff. It's just grunt work, basically.
Yeah, yeah. The Lotus 2 soundtrack, so that sort of sticks out for me. So can you talk us through how that project went?
Lotus 2, I mean, it
Hmm.
was uh, at the time it was Gremlin were doing it, and I got, well, magnetic fields, and so we got word that they wanted me to do the music for it,
Mhm.
and so I was thinking about, what am I going to write for this, and at the time, we didn't have a sampler at Imagitec. So I had no new way to get samples. I mean, if I wanted a sample of a synthesizer, it wasn't like I had synthesizers to sample. I had nothing. I had an Amiga and a desk. That was it.
Yeah.
And you know as well as I do at Imagitech, there was 50 employees and 49 chairs. So every day somebody was having a fight over who got the chair.
Very true. Very true.
So you'd have to wrestle the chair away from an artist or something and threaten to beat one up. Uh, but yes, so I'd gone home thinking about what I was going to write for it. And I had a dream about a piece of music to write. So I woke up the next day, could remember the music, so I ran to the office and put it in as quick as I could, but before I forgot it.
Did you ever get worried that you've subliminally sort of picked up on another piece of music and it's copyright?
Yeah, but I mean, back in the old, I mean, because I was doing so much music back then, some of them weren't exactly accidental. There
Right.
was a lot of inspiration from other people. I mean, because you're writing music all day long, 7 days a week. I mean, we're talking 8, 10 pieces of music a week. I mean, you're just cranking them out.
Yeah.
Um, so sometimes, there's little bits of bass lines from other songs in certain tracks, like the Top Gear Vegas piece. There's a bass line from the Sisters of Mercy, Alice, in there.
Ah, okay.
Oh, it's disguised, but
Yeah.
I mean, a good example of this was when I was working at Origin Systems. We had about 10 or 11 composers, and one of the guys had written a piece of music for the end credits on, I think it was Ultima 9 or 10 or something. And one of the other composers goes, I know that piece of music. I recognize it from somewhere. And he's like, I fucking wrote it last night. It can't be anything.
Yeah.
And he says, no, no, it'll come to me. Give me a day or so, I'll come back. And he comes back in a few days later with a VHS tape, and it was the end credits from Basic Instinct, the movie. Remember that, the Sharon Stone one where she crosses her legs?
Hmm.
And it was note for note identical. And the other
Jeez.
composer was just, he was like, oh, I can't believe this. I've never even seen this film. So those kind of things happen.
Yeah, yeah, it's unavoidable, I suppose, isn't it? With you doing it all day. What about the special effects in games, such as laser sounds, that sort of thing? Because you were involved with all that sort of thing as well, weren't you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, back in the day when we finally got a sampler, it was like, oh my God, you can just record things. And, like Space Crusade, it was actually jolly. Had we needed sounds of bullets falling on the floor. It's
Hmm.
like, where the hell are we going to get that? Because it wasn't like you had libraries of sound effects back then. So, well, it was Jolly who said, "Well, I've got some bullets at home, of course." And so he brought these bullets in, and we just recorded dropping them on the floor. It's like, oh my God, those are great. Totally fit it. But a lot of the sounds were just us going, with a microphone going, douche, bang. Not as bad as bang, making stupid sounds with your mouth.
Did you do the car racing noises as well then, like the engine noises and brake squeals and that sort of thing?
Not for Lotus 2. For the Rush 2 and Rush 2049 when I was at Atari for the Nintendo 64. Yeah.
Yeah.
We ended up it- we actually had someone with they had one of those Shelby Cobras. Uh, one, somebody had a friend that had one. So we're like, yeah, yeah, bring that out. We can record it. And so I'm hanging out of this Shelby Cobra as he's tearing up and down Silicon Valley, trying to record the output from the microphone, from the exhaust. But the best recording we got from all the vehicles was one of the secretaries had this piece of shit pickup truck from the, early 70s. The thing was just, it was rust holding it together. But
Yeah.
I recorded it idling and stuff, and that truck sounded the best. When you start pitching the samples, it changes the sound very much. So
Hmm.
uh, that pickup truck was the best sound we had in the game.
What was it like? I mean, I worked in America, but what would you say is there a big difference between working in America and working in the UK?
Yeah, very much. At the time, when I first went to Origin, I was kind of shocked because they were very. It was so different from the UK because in the UK, it was like we hardly had any equipment. Even at Ocean, I mean, we had some equipment. We had at Ocean, we had. I think each composer had one synthesizer, and so when I was doing games like Inferno with Alien Sex Fiend, I'd grabbed everybody else's synthesizer. I would go in early to steal the synthesizers and put them in my office so I could use them for the day, which pissed the other composers off. But before that, I didn't even have a sampler. Getting to Origin, they were like, okay, we've got you 30, 40 grand's worth of synth gear here. Um, Show up anytime before 11. I mean, basically, you can come and go as you please. If you want to go watch a movie, see the 11 o'clock showing down at the cinema, go do it. If you need to do some shopping. But here's the list of what you need to get done by the end of the month, the end of the project. And if you haven't got it done, you're going to be fired. And if the offices were usually empty during the day, but come the evenings and weekends, it was absolutely packed.
Oh, okay. Well, obviously, you
So
got
that,
paid unlike working at Imagitec.
yeah, that was, you get paid sometimes.
It was funny when I first joined the Imagitec because I lived in just to explain what was happening to the viewers. So we were based in a place called Dewsbury, which is sort of just on the very outskirts of Leeds and Huddersfield in West Yorkshire. I was living in Barnsley at the time, which is about an hour by bus, and I didn't realise what I was getting myself into. So I started working at Imagitec, and we just weren't getting paid. I wasn't warned about this. So obviously, I'd been unemployed. By the time it was end of the month, I was absolutely skint. And what we ended up doing, there's a few of us, we had to actually live at work. We had to sleep on the floor in the office just until some money came in. And remember, Martin would come round with the odd £20 note each.
Mhm. The first month I was at Imagitech, we lived in the offices. I think it was the first 3 months because there was 4 or 5 of us that came up from Portsmouth, and we were living in the office for the first 3 months, and then I went to live with Axel and stuff,
Right.
and Crazy Dave, the Mad Irishman.
Yeah, tell us that story because this is a fun story, isn't it? So Dave, I only met Dave briefly, and he sort of cornered me. I didn't actually know the guy, but he cornered me with a tin opener, and yeah, and I think he was just lonely. He just wanted me to talk to him, and everybody was terrified of him because he was just batshit crazy, wasn't he? But he just sort of
Right?
threatened me with a tin opener and just said, "So how are you doing?" I'm like, "Good, good."
Yeah, he had some severe emotional issues, and he got rather suicidal,
Yeah,
and to the point where every Friday night he would get extremely drunk and try and kill himself,
right.
uh, which was really troubling. And they sent him off. They ended up sending him back to Ireland to get some help, and he got some help, and then he came back. And I think the last time we heard of him, he was living with Gavin, and he drunk a bottle of aftershave or something, and he was crawling through his garden thinking he was a commando or something. And
Jeez.
yeah, so I think the police were called, and he was sent back to Ireland for good.
Right. Wasn't he keeping jars of blood under his bed and stuff like that?
Yeah, there was some stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
The mental toll on people in the games industry is it's been discussed elsewhere. I think it's more prevalent these days. People get help a lot easier. Those days it was stop killing yourself and do your work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I remember I was working on a project with at Runecraft, and someone we were under so much pressure because we were going to close it down basically. So I was working on about three games at once, and one guy on my team went out at lunchtime and just didn't come back. And we rang the ambulance, the hospital, and it turned out he'd passed out in in Asda on his lunch break. I think I collapsed as well in a restaurant around about the same time. Just had a massive panic attack. Thought I was having an heart attack. And yeah, it's mad how it used to be, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, solidly, working for it. I mean, there was times when I stayed awake for 3 days working on stuff
Yeah.
just to hit deadlines and get things out in time. These days, if somebody asked you to do that, it'd be like, well, it's going to cost you. At least there'd be a reward at the end of the tunnel, light at the end of the tunnel.
Were there any games that you really enjoyed working on? Like, what was your favorite game?
I really enjoyed working on TFX,
Ah,
um, because it was the first project where it had it had a big, huge soundtrack. It was cutting edge at the time. I mean, if you look at it now, the graphics are almost laughable, but at the time it was like, holy cow, that looks like the real thing. It's like you're flying an airplane.
yeah.
So I wrote this big soundtrack for it, which I still get emails about today, which is nice. So obviously I did something right. But I mean, every project has its ups and downs. Horizon Chase Turbo was great to do
Yeah.
just because I got to revisit all the old ideas, use a bunch of chip sounds, and go totally crazy with the soundtrack.
Hmm.
But Inferno was great because I got to work with Alien Sex Fiend, and that was good to see a different way of composing. How they
Yeah.
worked.
How did that work? Because I've spoke to Nick actually. I've interviewed him in the past, and
Have you?
yeah, yeah, really nice bloke, isn't he?
Yeah, he's lovely. I mean, the two nicest people you ever hope to meet. Um,
Yeah.
so I was working at Ocean. Gary Bracey comes into my office one day, and I'm screwing around playing the latest Inferno demo, and I've
Hmm.
got because he'd said he wanted to try and get a band involved, and so I had a track of Alien Sex Fiend called "Mrs. Fiend Goes to Outer Space," which is just a synth track with some samples on the top.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm flying the spaceship around, and it really worked quite well with the music. But initially, they had one of the guys from Zodiac Mind Warp who they wanted to get me involved with, and he came in and we met and we talked about how we do the music and stuff. Um, but it wasn't a really good fit at the time.
Yeah.
He was going through a shit ton of personal stuff. Obviously they'd had a big hit or two, and his wife had left him and been all this drama stuff.
Right. Right.
Um, but then we managed to get Alien Sex Fiend, and they came up and they worked for 6 weeks with me, and we cranked out 17 tracks.
Bloody hell.
I've
Uh,
still got these little postcards. Then Nick made these little postcards to stick on the wall, so we knew which tune to do next or which one was derivative of this one. So I've still got those stashed
ah.
away.
How was the way he worked different to the way you worked?
They were just a lot more reliant on experimenting with samples and stuff.
Yeah.
They'd look really weird sounds. They had there's a track of theirs called "Now I'm Feeling Zombified," and I
Hmm.
was like, what's that weird sound? There's a weird percussion sound that's distorted that plays all the way through it. Um, and he's like, well, there's this little box here. It's a little effects unit, but it's broken. And we don't know how it's broken, but if we tap it with our finger, it makes this weird sound. So that's what they've done. They just sit and tap this little weird box that makes random sounds.
Have
That was kind of fun.
you ever considered doing mainstream music? Just music, not games music.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've done some. There was a game I did a year or two ago called Swivel. It's a meta VR headset game,
Hmm.
and it's one of those movement music things. It's like Lights or Beat Saber,
Hmm.
except you're going down a hallway. You sit in a swivel chair. And it's like Beat Saber, except you sit down.
Ah, I see. Right.
You're well seated. And so for that, I wrote a bunch of songs, and that was a lot of fun. I mean, it was really I found it really satisfying to use vocals and stuff. It made it so much easier. When you've got a vocal track, it just makes life, because you're not stuck to just instrumentation. You've
Mm.
got someone singing to carry things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've carried on working in the industry, haven't you? But you're more sort of toy orientated these days.
Yeah,
You've done some work for Fisher Price.
yeah. I worked for Fisher Price for a few years. Um, And so, because at the time I'd been working at Atari, and Atari were uh, the writing was on the wall. I mean, Atari Games had been there 29 years or something at the time.
Hmm.
I mean, it was one the longest running video game company, but they were owned by Midway, and it was really obvious that the Midway were just canceling game after game. So it's like, yeah, this isn't going to last for long. Something bad's coming down. So I started looking for another job, and the technology in toys had evolved to the point that video games had, 15, 20 years before that. So
Hmm.
it seemed like a natural move to go into doing music for toys. That's what all these little development kits are, toy
Ah,
chips.
what sort of toys are they? Well, how do they incorporate the sounds?
Um, it's, Toys are basically, I mean, the sound chips are just it's like an Amiga sound chip that has input and output on, 10, 20 buttons or so, whatever's how many are in the toy. So when kid presses a button, it makes a sound, whether it's a piece of music or sound effects or
Ah,
speech.
okay.
So,
Ah,
we do things like that and have things like singing and stuff. Although, except it's incredibly low bit rates. I mean, the space on these toy chips it's very much like the Amiga, where you fit everything in 32 kilobytes or 64 kilobytes. And you got to
hmm.
squash it all down. It's very satisfying work. I love those limitations.
Yeah, it's nice working to those, isn't it? I think that. Do you think that it's in the olden days? Olden days, it was often easier because you didn't have the choice overload that you get when you've got sort of loads of memory. When you've got like a restricted palette, it's much hard. It's easier in a lot of ways, isn't it? Because it's you know what you're working with.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, you know what you can do, where your limitations are. I mean, when I think the hardest thing I found for Horizon Chase Turbo was choosing the sounds. I think I
Yeah,
spent over a week just choosing sounds for it. Whereas before you would be like, okay, you'd spend 10 minutes looking for a sound and you'd have one. If
yeah.
any was good enough back then.
Well, we can hear your tunes on your website. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a Bandcamp page. You can listen to them on Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, YouTube. It's all over the place.
Well, thanks for the chat, mate. It's been really fascinating. It's nice to catch up with you as well.
Ah, you too. It's been a long
Yeah,
time.
yeah, I'll have to get over there one day. I very nearly did, didn't I? When I was going down to Louisiana that time, I nearly cropped in, but didn't quite happen in
Ah,
the end.
you've been nice. You just swung by.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks again, Barry.
All right, thanks, Sean.
Cheers, mate.